I've accepted the puppet warp that I applied in the previous exercise, and I've gone ahead and saved off my modifications as thebigp.psd, found inside the 23 distort folder. So you may recall that I took that live editable text, I placed it inside of a smart object, and then I applied puppet warp as a smart filter, essentially. As a result, I've got this filter mask. Now, this filter mask isn't going to do me any good. If I click on it to make it active, and then let's say I grab my brush tool from the toolbox, and I've got a very big brush going, this 500 pixel brush, that's fine. I'll press the X key in order to make my foreground color black, like so. And then I'll paint away the effect, and that allows me to merge the modified version of the P with the original version of the P, which looks terrible. I don't know why in the world I'd want to do such a thing. Now that is an option if you want it, but I don't want it. So I'm going to right click on this filter mask thumbnail here inside the layers panel, and I'm going to choose delete filter mask just to get rid of that item so it's not cluttering up my panel. And then I'll press the M key to switch back to my rectangular marquee tool, and then we will apply some additional modifications to this jump puppet layer. So I'm going to double click on the puppet warp item right there in order to revisit the puppet warp mode. And let's go ahead and apply a few other pins. I will click on the top of the U, like so, and down here at the bottom as well. And then I'll drag these guys upward. You don't really have constraints when you're working with this tool. You can't press the Shift key and have it do anything anyway. You can press the Shift key all you want, but Photoshop is not going to constrain how you drag the pins. So it's not going to serve you any good. Anyway, I'm going to click on the top of this P, the bottom of the P as well, drag this guy upward in order to create this effect. And that follows the contours of the legs pretty nicely, so not really anything else to do there. Click at the bottom of this P, click at the top, drag this guy up. Now notice this part of the P is coming too far into the leg. I don't want that. So I'll click here, let's say, and then drag this area down like so. Click to set yet another pin and drag the stem over. And I'm ending up with a little bit of a sway, as you can see, associated with the stem. If I don't like that, I press the Alt key or the Option key in a Mac and rotate that pin once again. So rotating pins can be extremely useful when you're distorting text and other objects inside the program. Another thing that you might find useful, I'm going to switch the mode from normal to rigid. Notice if I switch to distort, everything goes loopy. I don't want that. So I'll switch to rigid, and I end up locking down the letters pretty nicely. So this is the difference, incidentally, between rigid and normal. So that's normal, just slightly different. Switch to rigid, we're likely, in many cases, to get less sloping letters. Actually, you know what? I don't like that effect. I like normal better, so I'm going to switch back to normal. But it was worth investigating. And actually, a couple of other times that I tried this effect, I ended up liking rigid better. But you never know. Anyway, I'm going to move this pin down a little bit. I'm going to move this pin down and out. Then let's go ahead and set some pins in E, on the letter E, and drag this guy up like so. Then set a pin at this location and drag down a little bit. That ends up bending the E too much, so I could select this pin, press the Alt key or the Option key on a Mac, and drag like so in order to rotate the pin a little bit. And then click on this guy. Let's drag it out a little bit as well, and press the Alt key or the Option key and drag it down in order to create this kind of slope. Then I might click to set a pin in the middle, sort of whatever that's called on the E. I forget now, the bar. And I'll go ahead and drag it down as well in order to get a little bit of slope there. And I might Alt drag or Option drag in order to change the angle of that bar. Click on the bottom one, drag down a little bit like so. So it is going to take a fair amount of meticulous labor here. And if you feel like you want to adjust the kerning at this point, watch this. Just go ahead and shift click on each one of these pins in order to select all the pins in that letter, and then press, let's say, Shift left arrow to move the E over to the left. That might be too far, so I'll press the right arrow key a couple of times to nudge the E back over to the right. Then I'll click at the top of the T, click at the bottom of the T, drag the top down like so, and I might do this number. Let's see if I can do this just by Alt dragging or Option dragging. That's pretty good. I was able to get some slope associated with the top of the T. However, that also messes up the stem, so I'll have to set a point at this location and drag the T over a little bit like so. So modify these letters to taste, by all means. Now I'm going to just click and click on this P, drag it up like so. Hopefully we can get a little bit of work done a little more quickly without being totally sloppy on my part. I'm going to click at 5 points on the M because we need ultimate control over this letter, and then I'll go ahead and drag this guy up like so. That ends up looking pretty nice, and I'll drag this guy as well. If you want to change the way the tops of those letters slope, then you press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and drag next to one of those pins in order to change its angle. Once again, you might also find that you need to nudge some of the bottoms of these letters down, by the way. So you can click on any one of these letters and press the down arrow key in order to nudge it down. And you may find that it jumps over to the left or the right a little bit as you nudge the letter down. That's okay. Just go ahead and compensate by pressing one of the other arrow keys. I'm adding some other points, obviously. For the U, I'll go ahead and drag this guy up. I'll drag this guy down. And then finally, let's see, for the J, it's actually fairly perfect the way it is, but might as well jumble it up just a little bit so it matches the others. And I'll go ahead and drag this guy down as well. And then finally, the comma doesn't need to be stretched. It just needs to be moved. So I'll click in a comma like so. If you just have 1 point assigned to one of these letters and you drag that pin, that is to say around like so, then you're going to move as opposed to distort that specific character of type. And we end up getting this effect here. I'll press and hold the H key so that you can see what I have wrought using the Puppet Warp command applied on a character-by-character basis to live text that I've protected as a smart object here inside Photoshop.